Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you back to the Dynamic Decisions podcast, where we explore the strategies that drive successful decision making in the world of business. Why? Because the best decisions come from great conversations. I'm your host, Tisha Cable, CEO of C Model Data. But today, we have an executive sales leader and entrepreneur who has built a career on the principle of whatever it takes. And that's Tracie. She is the founder and CEO of the Bizness Jawn. Tracie has an extensive background in B2B commercial strategy, executive sales leadership, and new business acquisition across the energy, chemicals, and industrial sectors. She's got so much experience that I just need her to tell us all about it. Tracie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. Please give the audience even more of an intro into you and the Bizness Jawn and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction. I am absolutely thrilled to be here. You've basically given the movie trailer version. Let me just fill in just a little bit. I'm a chemical engineer by education, but most of my career has been in commercial roles, mostly sales and marketing, including account management, business development, sales leadership, sales management. And one of the things that I've learned along the way is while you can amass a lot of expertise in any particular field, having a level setting tool such as data and information is a good litmus test to make sure that you stay on track, so on and so forth. So I've been able to use that mantra in all the different endeavors that I've undertaken throughout my career, and I continue to do it now, which is even more crucial now that I lead my own boutique consultancy, which is focused mostly on sales coaching, business strategy, and speaking.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for our audience, let me just tell y'all something. There's only 22,000 chemical engineers in the world, right? So this is not something that a lot of people ever achieve. So first off, hats off to you for being a chemical engineer. And if that's the number in the world, or in the US, I'm sorry, excuse me, in the US, if that's the number in the US, then I'm pretty sure those that are Black and female, that number is probably in the much smaller numbers. I
You're
didn't look that
spot
up.
on. I'm
Yes.
used to being the only in so many different
Yes.
categories, but that one right there, straight out the gate,
Out the gate.
yeah,
Yeah. So
I've, yeah.
I just want to celebrate you and
Thank
celebrate that
you.
because these are the spaces that we should be in. But I'm grateful that you did the work. Okay. So here we are. We've got our introduction. I want to leap to high value sales mastery. So the B2B industrial sales world, chemicals, energy, lubricants, it operates on relationship cycles that span years, right? $1 million deals and technical complexity that most consultants really never, ever get to touch. So you spent decades as a head of accounts at ICIS and in strategic roles at Shell and DuPont. And then you walked away to launch Bizness Jawn. So walk us through that moment when you decided to leave the security of executive level corporate sales and bet on yourself as a consultant. What was the trade-off between the known trajectory and even compensation we know that corporate leadership can give us versus the uncertainty of building a consulting practice from scratch?
Great big question. So I've been working for someone else since I was 14 years old. Born and raised in Philadelphia, I got a job with this organization called Philajob. And from there, and I've had internships, I've worked in industry, doing lots of different things, right? That you mentioned. And it's always been comfortable for me to work for someone else. And as you mentioned, that proverbial security blanket, you know when you're getting paid, you know when direct deposit is going to hit, so on and so forth. But there's always been something nagging at me that I can do more for myself and add more value in ways that I don't have to worry about the constraints of corporate. And so after being in corporate for more than 25 years, I've gotten to a point in my career where I was at a crossroads. Outperformed, many of my peers. I've always been a high performer, and I wasn't necessarily getting what I expected to be in terms of compensation for all the value that I felt that I was bringing to organizations. And so I found myself at a crossroads earlier this year. And as I was looking for my next role, it just wasn't sitting right with me. And the more interviews I went on and the more preparation I did for working on somebody else's dream, the light bulb went off after, being encouraged by my tribe for years to say, it's time for you to strike out on your own. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I had all the support around me, all the resources, all the encouragement, cheerleaders, people that are pushing me, and I just jumped into the deep end with no floaties, and I haven't looked back. And it's been very, very rewarding. It is definitely a true sense of freedom that doesn't come without challenge, of course. I've already had my share of scraping the knees and everything because I've only been launched since June, technically,
Okay.
of this year, 2025.
Yeah.
But it's been such an incredible journey of trusting myself, believing in myself, and all the support that comes with it. And freedom is the term for me in 2025.
Come on, freedom. I like it. And congratulations on getting
Thank you.
started. A lot of people fail to launch. So this is very exciting that you've launched off to do this. So industrial type B2B sales operates really differently than like tech, SaaS, or consumer sales, right? There's longer sales cycles, there's technical specifications, there's procurement committees, relationship driven deals where personal credibility really matters. Like it matters a lot. So when you're actually teaching your high value sales mastery to your clients who may come from these faster moving sectors, how do you translate lessons from managing strategic accounts at places like Shell and DuPont to these frameworks that work across industries? Are there any core principles from complex industrial sales that transfer universally? And if not, are there any that just require complete reframing for the
You're
different
spot on.
contexts?
And you said it earlier in terms of longer sales cycles and also the need for building solid working relationships. This is not a transactional sale. So high value sales mastery, and when I say high value, it's another term is high ticket. So these aren't drops in the bucket. They aren't transactional where it's a one time. This is something that's repeatable business, whether it's consumer based products or even if it's consumable products is what I want to say, or even if it's consumption of data subscriptions or whatever like that. And so it requires a lot of patience, a lot of follow up and resilience to get through and stamina to get through the long sales cycles, all the while building relationships with every stakeholder, not only on the customer side, most importantly on the customer side, but also internal to organizations. So it's not necessarily a total reframe. It's just that anyone that has come from an environment where it's just a quick sale, one and done and move on, that's not what the space through which I coach. One of the biggest rewards that I've seen in the long-term relationship is you can see the evolution of the relationship and the blossom. There's also times where things don't necessarily go as planned. At the end of the day, logos don't necessarily do business with logos. People do business with people. And behind every
Mm.
logo, there are people. And so when you show up as a human and you use, and one of the things that I say in sales all the time, when you use your ears and mouth in the proportion, two ears, one mouth, and you listen more, you tend to get a whole lot more insight into what they're saying and what they don't say. So while that may be considered a surprise to some folks as in terms of what high value sales mastery truly is, the very first thing you got to show up with is the willingness to truly listen and then put yourself in the customer's shoes. And then the number one sales skill I think that everyone needs to have is come with your sense of curiosity. Be curious beyond
Mhm.
measure to uncover every single surprise, every single known fact, every speculation, and then validate that and justify it. And what one of the best ways to do that is with sound, independent data.
Come on. Okay, so you actually just came up with a framework just now. Listen more, be curious, gain insight, validate. Like, take it to the bank, y'all, because this is just the kind of stuff, simplicity and understanding. I mean, you take a very human ability. So that means that you can be trained to do this work effectively if one is willing to essentially put yourself aside and be outside in and listen first. So super good, super in-depth response, and I appreciate it.
Sure.
So I want to go into thinking about your scalable system. So you really emphasize building scalable systems over personal sales heroics. Your brand is built around whatever it takes and closing with confidence, which sounds very, very personal in a lot of ways, intensely personal. So when you're working with a B2B client whose revenue depends on a handful of rainmakers, how do you navigate between the tension between systemizing their sales process for consistency versus preserving the relationship magic that the top performers bring? And are there any times where you've encountered situations where the systems you recommend threaten the autonomy that star salespeople protect fiercely?
This is a very interesting question because I would say, as much as people would argue, they are not mutually exclusive. Let me first tackle the autonomy that salespeople like. Now, is it really autonomy? I remember working at DuPont as a market development manager for about 9 years. And in that role, I took on some other things like account management. I managed manufacturers, distributor, and everything, right? But this autonomy that salespeople talk about is this mindset of just leave me alone as long as I'm producing,
Mm,
and that pretty much stifles any coaching. It can stifle growth, so on and so forth. But if systems aren't built so that anyone with a high sense of autonomy or someone with a high sense of needing handholding, if your system does not have universal appeal, you're going to have that rub. You're going to have. But systems should not be built without input from the people who are going to be doing the work. Too
mm.
often have I worked for organizations where someone at a desk came up with this framework, came up with this process or these tools and all of these things, and then some other folks may have signed off on it, and then that is pushed on the sales team and get out there and be somebody, sell and make these sales, make this target, hit plan. Okay. But the more that you can incorporate folks, including those very strong personalities that just want to be left alone and be autonomous, when you actually invite other people to give input, they will have more of a stake in the game, skin in the game, and it will be something that they've signed off on. It'll be something that they like to be a part of, and you will actually have more uptake. You'll have them invested in the process because they were a part of its development, its creation, and in the spirit of accountability, this is what you said you wanted in order to be successful. If I only had this, now you got it. Let's figure out what it's going to take for you to hit your goals.
Yeah, you know what I really appreciate about this is it takes the operator's mindset and it tells the operator if you're going to build something, number one, you have to two-way collaborate, but it has to be in the interest of the sale. So
Yes.
we can't just have a bunch of data collection activities, right? Here's this field, add this data. It has to be in the interest of the sale because the salesperson has to see that their benefit is actually
Mhm.
filling in
Mhm.
that data, and it can't be cumbersome, and it can't be something I want to be able to report on these numbers for the sake of reporting on these numbers, but rather this is going to help a salesperson to sell more. So it really does help both sides, the operator to be outside in as well. I mean, we kind of just talked about this. So the salesperson is listening more. The operator has to also listen more, right?
Mhm.
Because and collaborate with the salesperson. And then the salesperson has to feed back. They actually have to say, this works for me or this doesn't, so that what it is that gets put in front of them, that system, that process actually works for the company to achieve its outcomes. That's
And
great.
here's the thing I'd like to
Yeah.
say about that as well
Yeah.
is the process for the sake of the sale has to be customer centric. So we're talking about the internal side of this equation, right? So the salesperson having input and building the thing that they're going to get out there and execute for the business. But that can be to the detriment of the customer experience. So it also
Mm.
needs to be within the context of customer centricity and how you want that customer to go through the buying journey. All of those things have to sync up.
Yeah, that's a great point. Hey, this is a quick message for our audience. I want you to think about your organization's current sales approach. Are you building scalable systems or relying on individual heroics? Share your experiences with us on LinkedIn or other social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. Okay, so you've led commercial activities across radically different B2B sectors, agricultural chemicals at Shell, industrial products at DuPont, market intelligence at ICIS. Each one of those has some different buying behavior associated with it. decision-making structures are different, and value drivers are different. When you're consulting with a client in a new vertical, how do you balance applying these proven frameworks from your experience versus respecting the nuances that make their industry different? Are there any signals that tell you when to push your methodology versus when to adapt because sector specific dynamics might genuinely require a different approach?
One of the benefits that I've had in the different places that I've worked up to this point, and you kind of touched on it in terms of going from selling elastomers, which were parts, to selling industrial lubricants, to selling data, which is intangible per se, is it really doesn't matter what I'm selling or what I've sold. We're solving a problem. We're addressing pain. Pain hurts in every one of those industries and more, regardless of how special they think that their business is. Now, obviously, folks think that the pain or the problem in their business is the most profound anywhere that they can find in this world. And you know what? Let's give them that because their perception is their reality, but they're also experiencing a lot of the symptoms that go along with that pain. So, my approach is you got to understand what the challenge is. And the challenge can be I'm trying to solve a problem or I'm trying to reach a goal or both, right? So problems are we're spending too much money because of cost exposure, and I need to limit my cost exposure because I keep blowing my budget. That is a definite problem geared more toward cost savings as opposed to we definitely need to get our sales up because we haven't been hitting our targets. So that's more of a goal. So when you get to the heart of the pain and not just the symptoms, sometimes we address the symptoms, but not the root cause of the pain. And so the problem never goes away. Here's an example, and this is kind of like in everyday sense. When you think about a person that's coughing, a lot of times we might give them a cough drop. And we can keep giving them cough drops, but the cough doesn't go away until
Mm.
they find out that part of the reason why they're coughing or the main reason why they're coughing is they might have COPD or emphysema, and they can treat that root cause, that symptom may go away such that we don't have to keep giving them cough drops. So that is addressing pain versus a symptom. And I approach everything, whether it's any of those industries and more. So this transcends pharma, med sales, government sales, parts, bulk, solid, data, SaaS, DaaS, it doesn't really matter. You've got to understand what the customer's challenge is and what their true pain is and what are some of those symptoms that come along with it.
Okay, audience. So you guys got that. I hope you were writing that down, especially if you're an emerging sales leader. This one critical thing, it's even why a business starts. So a business, a startup exists to solve a problem. It's the whole framing of a new solution is this problem space. It wouldn't be different when you're trying to sell somebody something, right?
Right.
So really good. All right. So my favorite thing to do in the world is this thing that I call a decision-making persona assessment. So we're
Uh-oh.
going to assess your decision-making style. I'll ask you 4 different questions that represent different approaches. After each one, you're going to tell me how much it resonates with how you actually make decisions, and
Okay.
you'll have a scale from 0 to 100%. But you only get 100% across all 4. So you have to keep that in mind as you answer each of the questions, and you have to keep track of how much you have left,
Okay.
right? Of the 100%. Okay, are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, here's the first one. It's called and the other thing is you'll tell me a little bit about why you've given that percentage after each one.
All right.
Okay. So the feeler is the first one. The feeler is a values driven leader. So this persona prioritizes alignment with core values and mission, often weighing the human impact and cultural fit of decisions alongside business metrics.
Mm.
So when considering a new client engagement for the Bizness Jawn, I ask myself, beyond the revenue this brings my business, what's the human impact of helping this organization close more deals? If I'm teaching a client to systematize high value sales for a product that solves genuine business problems, like helping manufacturers reduce waste, enabling energy companies to operate more safely, I'm multiplying positive impact. But if I'm just helping someone get better at extracting margin from customers who don't need their product, am I applying my whatever it takes philosophy to work that conflicts with my commitment to positive impact. When a lucrative client opportunity doesn't align with my values around sustainable business practices or creating meaningful value, how do I balance my consultancy's growth against the integrity that defines my personal brand? So, Tracie, how much does approaching decisions through that impact integrity lens resonate with you?
Oh my goodness. That pretty much sums up how I go about the business that I undertake. There is some there's one of the modules in my high value sales mastery course, which is about building your pipeline that talks about generating leads. And one of the things I say is not every lead is a good lead. Like in the everyday sense, people say not all money is good money.
Mm-hmm.
I take that lens because what I'm not going to do is sell my soul for the sake of a deal because I'm thinking about the long term. I just talked about how this is not a transactional, but rather a consultative. Consultative selling pretty much ensures that it leaves windows and doors open for you to come back and cross sell and upsell. So, in the spirit of not even knowing the other three questions, I'd give this a high percentage, on a 100% scale of probably like 45%.
Okay. 45% feeler. All right. Speaking of long term, the planner is a strategic visionary. So, this persona focuses on long term implications and future proofing decisions, thinking several moves ahead across multiple scenarios. So, when building high value sales mastery frameworks or advising clients on commercial strategy, I'm positioning for three divergent futures. In one scenario, AI and automation transform B2B sales where relationship building matters less than algorithmic matching and dynamic pricing, fundamentally changing what high value sales even means. In another, economic pressures extend sales cycles and raise risk aversion, making the trust building and consultative approaches more complex, industrial sales more valuable than ever. Excuse me. In a third, the shift toward virtual selling that accelerated during COVID becomes permanent, requiring completely reimagined approaches to relationship development without face to face interaction. Each future requires different capabilities. The first rewards technology adoption and data fluency. The second demands deeper consultative skills. The third requires digital relationship building mastery. How do I build frameworks that prepare clients for multiple scenarios without diluting focus on what drives results today? So, Tracie, how much does that multi scenario approach drive your strategic thinking?
I'd give it a number of about 25%. And I think what really goes in my favor is my engineering background. So, engineers are really taught how to think through problems from the rooter to the tutor, right? The whole process. And so I'm very process oriented in my everyday life, even though I haven't done engineering since the late 90s, right? You don't want me engineering anything actually these days. But I will tell you that that has helped me be a better businesswoman because of the way that I think things through with the end in mind, and then what are the different steps that it's going to take me to get there, and then when is good enough. So it also forces you to assess your own gaps in where you want to develop. And oftentimes we're like, oh, I'm good enough right now, but we are always required to be learning and growing if we want to bring value to folks because they're at different stages of their own development and their different goals as well. So, in terms of planning, in terms of also adopting technology, I use all of that as an opportunity for me to stay on the up and up in terms of what emerging technologies. AI is continuing to advance at breakneck pace. And the things that we just talked about a year ago are so much dramatically different. And there are ways that I can, even when I started building all the modules of my high value sales mastery, there are some things that I've learned in the last 6 weeks by going to several conferences on how I can integrate more technology, namely AI, to make the work process and the workflow for salespeople even more efficient. So all of that bundled together helps me plan better. It helps me understand where my gaps are, where I continue to need to grow. but that is so that I can continue adding value to my customers, because all of this is to lead the customer down the path of self-discovery as we are attempting to address their challenge and their goal. And so when the customer can go down and they can go down this path that they are seemingly leading, I'm obviously leading them down the path, but they're going down this path of self-discovery and arriving at a place where they're like, this totally makes sense for me, aligned with the values from also the first question. All of that kind of goes right there when you're right at the finish line, about to sign the deal, and you've got alignment all around.
It's good. It's good stuff. Y'all, hope y'all listening and writing some notes down because the nuggets of wisdom are being dropped. Okay, here's the next one. It's called the counter. It's a challenger of assumptions. So this persona questions conventional wisdom and looks for contrarian opportunities. So when evaluating a client sales approach, I ask myself, what fundamental assumptions about B2B selling might be limiting their thinking? The industrial sales world has long operated on the premise that relationships require years to develop, deals require multiple in person meetings, and technical credibility demands deep product knowledge. But what if some of that is inertia rather than necessity? What if there are ways to compress relationship building timelines without sacrificing trust? While competitors in the consulting space sell complex sales methodologies requiring months of implementation, what if the real barrier isn't knowledge, but confidence? That sales teams know what to do, but hesitate to execute boldly. When deciding whether to reinforce industry orthodoxies about relationship sales or challenge them with more direct approaches, how do I avoid the trap where being contrarian undermines the credibility that comes from my decades in these sectors? So, Tracie, how much does that assumption challenging perspective shape your work?
This is where the slope gets pretty slippery, because what you're dealing with is emotional versus psychological, right? And when you think about all of this inertia, one good way to level set everyone is data, because documentation beats conversation all day long. And so when you present data, data should, as a matter of fact, I heard you say this at the CIS conference, and it's absolutely true. Like I really sat up in my seat just a little bit with my spine straighter when you said it, because it is absolutely the premise as to why you want to use data to dispel such tension and inertia. And it is, data should be there to validate and test your assumptions
Yes.
rather than justify what it is that you want to have done. We see how data is used to help tell a story because we want a certain outcome, versus it's there to challenge us on, is this the best way? Is this the smartest way? And all the things, right? So when I think about, data is a place that can help bring forth both the emotional and the psychological that everyone can relate to. And when there is emotion, you can use the data to say, where is this coming from? If the data says this, XYZ, ABC, 1, 2, 3, but we're doing something over here, what's the reason? And the questioning is the open questions. It's asking how much, how often, why. These are questions that people have to answer without a yes or no answer. And so, and without a yes or no, yeah, in a yes or no manner. And you have to do that in a way that is professional and also respectful, because you don't want people feeling threatened, but it
Mm-hmm.
does force people a little bit out of their comfort zone and just has them thinking about things in a more open and objective way. So data is the thing that you want to use. Data is the numbers, but the information is what helps you color and create the scene. That is a great level setter when you're dealing with inertia and we've always done it this way. If I hear that one more time,
Yeah.
we've always done it this way, which means that you're going to continue to get what you're getting and not necessarily what you want. So let's use this to actually level set and bring forth all the ideas to help us get closer to addressing your challenge.
Awesome. So what's your counter number?
My counter number was, so that was 25. That brings me to, that actually brings us to 5%.
So you want 5% on counter, leaving you
Oh, I'm
with
sorry. So 25%.
25?
25% is what I would assign to that, which
Okay.
is the litmus test. I always call that the litmus test. What is going to
Okay.
be the level setter? Yes.
Okay. Okay. So our last one is actually data driver. So
Well, that's
hold
that's
on.
interesting because
Yeah.
I would find, and it's funny, I didn't even know what you were going to ask me, but the
Yeah.
interesting thing is how much data actually drives in that, because
In
that
the
leaves me with
counting.
an extra 5%. So that kind
Yes.
of tells you that collectively that's 30%, which gets us to the 100, which is
Yeah.
very, very important.
Absolutely. And I actually appreciate the way that you translate the counter, the contrarian into a data lens because as the flip side. So I love that you made that connection because the last one is called the data driver. It's an evidence-based decision maker. So this persona relies on metrics, analytics, and concrete evidence to validate. So on one hand, what you were saying before on your counter is you were using the same data to come up with the other side of the story. And now you're going to use it here to validate your decisions. So before committing to strategic recommendations for a client's commercial roadmap, I ask myself, what does their performance data actually reveal about where the real leverage points are? I want rigorous analysis distinguishing between metrics that demonstrate sales activity, calls made, proposals sent, pipeline coverage ratios, and indicators that predict revenue outcomes like conversion rates at each stage, average deal size by segment, time from first contact to close, win rates against specific competitors. Here's the paradox. The metrics that prove a sales team is working hard are immediately visible. But the leading indicators that reveal whether they're working smart,
Mm.
relationship quality with decision makers, alignment between their solution and the customer's strategic priorities, competitive positioning, they often resist quantification. So, how do I balance data driven conviction about what to change against the qualitative factors that experienced salespeople insist matter, but struggle to measure? How do I make that balance? So, how much does that approach, that evidence seeking approach, kind of guide your decision? So, you
Oh
got your
my
5%
goodness.
left, but yeah, tell me where you go.
My goodness. I feel like, questions not seen beforehand. I kind of feel like it does bleed into that third question to make up that final 30%.
Yeah.
But you cannot manage what you cannot measure. That's the first premise, right? And so within that realm, you're also talking about what you mentioned, quantitative versus qualitative. I can't tell you how many times I'm looking at a pipeline, a certain rep's pipeline. They've got a lot of deals in there, and there's lots of different things that you can look at. The deals stacked in one stage, like everything's in solution and propose, or everything's in negotiate, as opposed to the diversity of the sales stages. I've got some in identify, some in qualify, some in solution and propose, negotiate, and then I'm getting close to closing. The challenge here is you want to have enough of the deals in there so that you understand how to get through the churn, the velocity that you talked about. There's lots of sales activity that makes people look like they're busy, but if nothing's really going through at the other end of the pipeline that shows a closed one deal in whatever the CRM, then it's like, are they truly working more effectively, right? Efficiently. And a lot of times, unfortunately, the answer is no.
Mhm.
So data is the thing. The quantitative data is what you use to then start asking questions that point to the qualitative data. So if I don't see a lot of deals coming through that are closing and winning, but you've had a lot of activity,
Mhm.
some of the qualitative questions I might start asking is, tell me about how you've been engaging the customers. That's the
Mhm.
open question versus are you engaging the customers? Yes.
Mhm. Mhm. Of
Conversation
course
over,
I
right?
am. Right.
Right. Okay. So how are you engaging? How they respond to that can tell you, okay, so tell me about this particular meeting, who all was there. That could give me clues as to not all the right stakeholders were there. You were talking to an influencer, but not the true decision maker. Do you even understand what their decision making process is? Have you just been spinning your wheels? So, looking at quantitative data based on sales activity in a pipeline, for instance, is very visible, but You being able to interpret what you see there helps you form as a leader when you're coaching folks. It helps you form questions in your mind and pose to them in an open fashion that leads you to the qualitative measures that can help you tighten up and then get that velocity through the sales cycle.
Fantastic. So we got you. You are 45% feeler, 25% planner, 25% counter, and 5% data driver. But that 5% has a caveat because you are thinking about data in every other one of those steps, which I think
Agree.
is a great use of this activity. So thank you so much for doing that. As we wrap up, you have helped these organizations to really transition from individual sales heroics to scalable, predictable revenue systems while maintaining your commitment to meaningful impact, because I didn't even get into all the work you do on the impact level. If you had an insight for leaders who are struggling to build scalable systems, specifically in sales, without losing the relationship magic that drives their current success, what would that insight be?
Impact and alignment are sisters, I'd
Come
say.
on.
Okay. You have to make sure that everything that you're doing is aligned. I talked about customer centricity. A lot of times we're going in and we're really only thinking about our own perspective. And without alignment and truly understanding what the customer is trying to achieve, what their pain points are, what you can offer as a solution to address that pain point and the value that it drives for them in a win win way, which it also drives for you for sustained value over time with the opportunity to keep the window and door open for even more opportunities to work on together. That's what I would say. You want to make sure that you stay aligned throughout that entire process, and then you can measure the impact mostly in the value space.
Mm, come on, value. Thank you so much. Can you share with our listeners where they can learn more about you and more about the Bizness Jawn?
Oh, of course. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Tracie Haygood under LinkedIn, but also you can find out more about the Bizness Jawn at thebusinessjawn.com. And that's the BIZNESSJAWN. And if anybody knows about John, you know that I am a born and bred Philly girl.
Yeah, that is awesome. So listen, for our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember, the best decisions come from great conversations. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe and rate it, share it with your network, and please let's keep the conversation going on social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. And until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep leading with purpose.